Lucky you.
36
Tuned
best holes in
into
golf.
Alternate Shots podcast,
Barney's Army.
where we talk about
Sandy.
golf, poker,
James Bond.
horse racing,
Double.
classic movies.
Zenyatta.
We have no script.
Down the stretch they come.
We are glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Most tenure. He started the year before Bobby Jones won the first Open, held at Wingfoot, right?
He asked me, so I used to go out and play at night. He said, "Oh, you go play last night, Junior?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And he'd be like, "What'd you hit into 18?" And he meant 18 West. And I said, "Oh, I hit a 6-iron at 175 yards." And he'd be like, "Bobby Jones flipped a little sandwich in there from 70 yards, 1929 with a gutta percha ball." It's like, "You're nothing, Junior."
Did you meet any famous people, any of the golf pros? Did you meet Phil Mickelson?
In 2006, I actually served Tiger Woods for breakfast.
You didn't spill anything on him.
No, that time I did.
That time you didn't.
Thinking that this year will be Dad's 75th anniversary of his win. And we were thinking about how cool it was. Butch is 79, Craig 76, I'm 72, and we're sitting by our dad's locker in the champions room, and we're emotional. And we sat there for about 2 hours and we reminisced. Then another member came in with his 3 guests, and then another member came in. And I don't know, we just got telling stories. And it was like 2 hours later, and I don't think anybody had said a word other than the 3 of us. And I saw one of the members the next morning, and I apologized. I said, "God, we kind of took over up there, you know." And the guy said, when my 3 guests got back to the cottage, they turned to me and said it was the 2 greatest hours they ever spent in golf. So
I can imagine that.
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting because the next week I went down to the TaylorMade place here in Carlsbad to get fitted for clubs, and Scotty Scheffler was there, and I don't know Scotty, and I'm just growing up in the family that I grew up in. I've learned to leave celebrities alone, but I actually wanted to tell him the story of us being in that locker room, and for him to imagine that his kids that aren't even born yet 80 years from now might sit in that locker room by their dad's locker and say, "My dad won the Masters."
Favorite guys, and what were their nicknames? And tell us about those guys back then.
You've nailed a couple of them. One of my favorites was a guy by the name of Ice Cream Don. And the reason he got the nickname was he used to drive the Good Humor truck. And he was a big drinker. And he would park the Good Humor truck in New Rochelle at a place called City Park. And there was a bar there, and he'd go into the bar. And it was just a matter of time before the kids figured out his routine. So they used to raid the truck every day while he was in there getting drunk.
Nice.
His brother had like a management job in the ice cream company. So his brother was always able to cover it for him at the end of the day. Well, one day they stole the truck, and that was it.
They stole the truck.
That's a tougher one to cover for there.
They couldn't cover it, so he became a caddy. And so he showed up with his like white son.
There are 2 stories, basically. Bobby Collins told the story about me trying to hit the ball, open the face of the 5-wood and hit the ball on the green because I hit a really long drive. It was easy to hit a long drive because the turf was frozen. But I hit a really long drive, and I thought I could get home, and I hit the tree, and it dropped in the lake. And I started marching out in the lake, and he said, "What are you, crazy?" I said, "No, we're going out there." Well, he didn't know that I had done that previously. Maybe the week before, I hit it over the trees, but it didn't get far enough, and it stopped out in the lake. So I walked out in the lake, and I wedged it up on the green and made my par. Well, the following week, when I hit the one and it hit the tree and dropped down, and that's when I walked out on the ice with him, and he thought I was nuts, but we survived. By the way, it was walking out. If you walk out on the ice, it creaks, and it scared the hell out of Bobby.
Yeah, he said when you hit that wedge, he heard the crackle sound. He said, "Oh, that's the end of it."
Yeah, please don't hit behind the ball.
That's right.
So I said, oh, fantastic. So I got to know him very well, well enough that I actually ended up putting him out of business at the end of the day because he took one of my bets and didn't put it in at the window. And sure enough, he owes me $2,400. And as God is my witness, Lewis always paid. And he didn't have the money, and he shows up on Thursday with a broken arm. And he pays me the $2,400. And I said, what happened? You fall down the stairs? He said, Billy, in my business, sometimes I got to borrow from the wrong guys. If I don't pay them, this is what happens. I said, so wait, they broke your arm and you're paying, because you're paying me the money instead of them. He says, yeah, but I owe you the money. And I always pay my. So I said, so what happens next? He says, well, if I don't have the money by next Thursday, they'll break my other arm. So I said, get the hell out of here. I said, you keep the money, you owe me. I'm not going to break your arm. You can pay me when you can. That was the last time he booked a bet. Have X-outs been, are they extinct now?
Billy, that's a great question.
Look at Eve Arden.
Oh,
Eve Arden was a great character. I always felt like Eve Arden was the one you wanted to be on your side in the movie. She was never the leading character, but in any kind of situation where there's always conflict in the movie, you wanted Eve Arden on your side. The wise guy too. She was great wisecracks. Somebody made a comment in one of her movies about how great men were, and she just says the little dears.
So when Dick won the club championship, I think in '66, I won it the next year, I think it was '67. This is so long ago, I don't remember. I remember winning, but I don't remember the year. So back then, the club championship was a big deal. And it was always on Labor Day weekend. And they had to have a qualifying to get 16 players, I believe, because you had so many good players. And it was Labor Day weekend. And it was a semifinal match. And Dick was one up going to 18. And you guys have been there longer than me, but I've never seen anybody do this. He drove in the right rough and he caught a flyer and he flew the green. I don't think I've ever seen anybody fly the green on their second shot on 18 West. Very rare. And it went over on the path, the path between 1 West and 10 West. So all the members came off the terrace. There might have been 75 people watching this match. And Dick is on the path and my dad's standing there. And he turns to Dad and says, Dad, do I get a drop? Well, Dad, dumb like a fox, he's not going to give his kid a drop, in front of all the members and stuff. And my dad says to him, you've got 14 clubs, it would behoove you to pick one. So he makes bogey and then he wins on the 19th hole. And afterwards he says to my dad, you sure about that drop? He said, I'm sure that you did get a drop, but I wasn't going to give it to you because where am I going with this? I'm the golf pro here. I'm going to make a whole bunch of enemies. He said, but in the future, you should have brought your opponent over. See, he said, I think I get a drop, and then you could look in the rule books and stuff like that. But he said, well, you almost cost me the club championship. He said, no, you cost yourself because you didn't know the rules. So
you bring friends up to Wingfoot, even people have been there, that moment when they're in the grill room and it's, you finish playing, let's say at 4 o'clock and it's now 6 o'clock and everybody's laughing, having a great time. We're like, oh my God, I never want to leave here.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Why would you want to leave? Right time of year at 6 o'clock, you might be going back out for an emergency 9.
And the loop was kind of mundane. It started off very quiet, very slow and whatnot. And we were excited. So finally I got to 7 East and I went to George Burns. I said, I've had enough, let's have some fun. I said, I bet you $5 in front of the 3 amateurs. You can't par this hole. And he looks at me and he, I just came in second in the US Open. I said, all right, you want to make it $10? So we get there and I'm up at the tee. Birdman went out in 4 caddy. And back then you had the persimmon wood. So, you didn't hit it the way they hit it today, but absolutely Sunday tattoos. His persimmon drive had to be 280. Right down the middle. And that's when I knew I won the bet because the pin was all the way in the back right-hand plateau. And I knew that he was going to try to shut me up and make birdie. So he went after the pin and came up in the middle of the right-hand bunker. And we all know that the only way you're getting that up and down is if you make the 15-footer. So he hit a great bunker shot, rolled to the left, and then he's got this 15-footer. And I said, you know, we got $10 on this now. You want me to read the putt for you? He goes, leave me alone. Missed the putt.
The king called Tommy Armour.
Which king, by the way?
You got the king of Morocco calling Tommy Armour. And he said, Mr. Armour, or as he would have said, Monsieur Armour, I'd like you to come to Morocco and teach me how to play golf. And Tommy Armour declined and said, the guy you need is Claude Harmon. And that's how Claude got that job. Well, it was a great referral until there was the generals of the army under the king revolted when Claude was there, and he got the bejesus beat out of him. The revolt was put down, but Claude Harmon came back. I mean, he had nothing. He was black and blue from his ankles to his chest.
Oh,
I
so
mean,
he was roughed up.
getting beat up with rifle butts. So when you think that when the king of Morocco calls, that you, boy, man, this is payday. Well, it's not always payday.
And it's sort of like a little bit of Forrest Gump-esque, right? When you think about all these different arenas that he not only participated in, but had such great success in. And I say that, of course, just as a proud son. I'm immensely proud to be his son. But what's wild, Bob, I don't know if you know the story. So he had promised the network that he was going to get an interview with Vince Lombardi before the game. And he was trying to make a name for himself now in broadcasting. And of course, he knew Vince because Vince had been the offensive coordinator for the Giants. Yeah. So he had special access that the other guys in the media, other guys and gals in the media did not have access to, right? So in the pregame meeting, he said, okay, I've spoken to Vince. Vince is going to give me the interview. And, we can count on it. Let's put it on the schedule. So Vince is coming out of the tunnel. And again, I've been hitting the head maybe too many times. It was the LA Memorial Coliseum, wasn't it? Vince is coming out of the tunnel, and Dad goes up to him, and he, brings a microphone up, and Vince waves him off. And so, and Dad said, nah, and he chased after him. Dad was pretty quick, and Vince was kind of lumbering over. So he catches up to Vince, and then you mentioned there was actually another network that was covering the game. There were two different networks covering the game, right? So one of the other reporters, I forget who it was, bolted after because he saw what was happening. So I guess he only got the other reporter got just a fraction of what my dad caught with Vince. But my dad said Vince was as white as a ghost. He was so nervous for this game because I think even then, and a lot of who calls Vince Lombardi nervous, right? I mean, he's sort of the epitome of ice water. But Dad knew him in a different way, and I think Dad knew his ticks and, had spent enough time with him. He called him a very, very dear friend. But I think Vince had, what's cool in that story, I think, is that Vince had the foresight to know what this game was going to mean for the NFL, right?
And I said, you remember Paul Forsman?
Sure.
He comes in and he said, I heard that we hired a new assistant professional. And I said, that's me. Alicia Dibos, nice to meet you. And he goes, are you ready to give a lesson? And I said, Mr. Forsman, it's snowing outside. And he goes, don't you have a jacket? I said, yes, I do. So I gave my first lesson to Mr. Forsman on the range. And I was freezing. It was so cold. It was so nice. And we became the best friends.
When I was the president, I told Colin Burns, I said, look, if any celebrities want to play here and you're like trying to work something out to play with them, I got first look. So he calls me one day and he goes, Mark Messier wants to play. So I'm like, done. I'm a big hockey fan. I was a big Ranger fan. So let's play. So we played. It was me, Mark Messier, a friend of his, and Rick Joyce. And Mark wanted to play for some money, and I was playing pretty good at the time. I was a 4 or 5 handicap, and Rick was probably about the same. And he was like super big competitor. He was, he was a good golfer. He wasn't great, but he was really solid. Obviously, with the hockey players, can hit the ball pretty good. And we had a lot of money on 18 West, and I had like a 5-iron in right center of the fairway. And as I hit the thing, it just sounded so good and just flies in the air. As I'm turning, I go, Messier, you can't have our money.
Keith was, I mean, Keith was everything. Kind of my greatest, maybe my greatest honor in TV was getting to do his induction speech into the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Yeah, I started working with him when I was 32. And he was almost exactly the same age as my dad. And I think in some ways he treated me like a son. I mean, he was great to me. He was great. And a heck of a golfer. He shot his age every year from the age of 68, I think, to 83 or something like that.
Wow.
He was a heck of a golfer. That's how we got to be so close. We have some funny story about how at first event I produced with him, they had something called Field Turf in Nebraska, where they had just put in, it was a new artificial turf, and it was kind of made up of tire rubber. And I had heard Keith was a good golfer. I'd worked with him a couple years before, so I thought a cool way to show the tire rubber was to hit a golf ball from like the 40-yard line. We did that on Friday as we recorded. So I had Keith, who I knew was a good golfer, and Bob Christie, who was also a good golfer, with the 2 announcers. And I said, hey guys, why don't we go? You guys hit golf balls. We'll record it. We'll show it slow motion. It'll be fun. People get to see you hit a golf shot. So they both hit and they both missed from 40 yards. They missed the field goal. And I was like, yes, I thought you guys were good at golf. And they said, oh, let's see you do it. And I was able to do it. And Keith said, oh, you want to play golf next week out in California? And friendship from there.
So now they're on the, have you guys heard this story?
No.
No, I haven't.
So Dad was because of Hogan, he learned to chart his way around the course. So the first hole had 2 fairway bunkers out there, about 250. So in the qualifying and all the matches, he'd hit a 1-iron and a 9-iron on the green. So now Snead has, made this incredible comeback. And Snead takes out a driver, and he said he hits this thing. Not only would he carry the bunkers by 50 yards, but it was right down the middle. Just the most beautiful drive you ever saw. And I'm standing there with a 1-iron. I'm like David and Goliath now. So I go back to my bag and I get my driver and I tee it up. And he says, I don't know what came over me, but I said to myself, you know what? I qualified 36 holes. I think that year he beat 3 major champions to get to Snead. I made it this far with the great Sam Snead. I'm going to stick to my game plan. So he went back and put the driver back, got the 1-iron, 9-iron, 20 feet. And he said, Sam played the most beautiful pitch shot you ever saw, about 3 feet from the hole. And back then they played stymies. And by sheer luck, my dad missed his putt and it left Snead a stymie. He couldn't putt at the hole. So I said, what would you do in that instance? Just concede a half. He said, no, you got to make the great Sam Snead putt it out sideways and then give it to him. You got to embarrass him a little bit. So they got to the 42nd hole. This is another, he must have felt like he was one of them stories. So they both had about 25 footers. Snead was getting ready to putt, and my dad says, I don't think you're away. Now, how many guys would do that? Club pros, And Snead says, well, why do I have to believe you? And he said, well, you don't. Let's get a referee. So a referee came out and got a rope and measured it. And Dad was away by 6 inches. And Dad made it, and Snead missed. And when he congratulated my dad, excuse my language, but he said, you hung my ass with that rope.
You know what? When I walk at Wingfoot, and I walk a lot on the course, and I feel privileged to walk on the grass that every great player that's ever played the game has walked on.
Thanks for joining us today.
Billy Harmon.
We really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity.
And please
Arky.
subscribe to the
Two
show
Router.
and hit
Claude
the bell
Harmon.
icon so you get notified.
Movie Classics.
New episodes.
Mark Gable.
Hit 'em
On
hard
Job.
and hit 'em off.
Best 36 holes.